I never thought the hardest part of going home would be seeing him again. Not because Dallas and I had ended on bad terms. We hadn't ended at all. One day, when we were 17, his family packed up their lives and moved across the country after his dad accepted a new job. We stood in my driveway pretending we'd stay in touch forever. We promised to visit. We even joked that nothing would change. It changed anyway. The texts slowly became shorter. Calls turned into birthday messages. Then those disappeared too. Before I knew it, the guy I'd spent every summer with had become someone I only remembered whenever an old photo popped up on social media. I told myself that was just how life worked. People grew up. People moved on. Still, every time someone mentioned his name around town, something inside me always paused for a second. My name's Clark. I'm 26, work remotely as a graphic designer, and after 3 straight years of city life, burnout finally caught up with me. My mom called one Tuesday afternoon. You should come home for a while. I'm fine. You sound exhausted. I'm just busy, she laughed. Clark, I changed your diapers. I know when you're lying. She wasn't wrong. 2 weeks later, I was driving down the same quiet streets where I'd learned to ride a bike. Nothing had really changed. The old diner still sat on the corner. Mr. Peterson still watered his lawn every evening. The water tower still leaned just enough to make newcomers nervous. Small towns had a strange way of freezing time. Walking into my parents' house felt almost surreal. Mom hugged me so tightly I thought she might crack a rib. Dad! She yelled. He's here already? My father called from the garage. I'm standing right here, I laughed. The next couple of days were exactly what I needed. Coffee on the porch, helping Dad fix things that probably didn't need fixing. Listening to Mom gossip about neighbors I'd almost forgotten existed. It was peaceful. Until Friday morning. I was carrying groceries out of my truck when I heard a familiar truck engine stop across the street. I glanced up without thinking. A black pickup pulled into the driveway of the old Miller house. The driver's door opened. My heart forgot how to beat. Dallas. He climbed out wearing faded jeans and a gray t-shirt, running one hand through slightly longer dark hair than I remembered. He'd filled out over the years, broader shoulders, stronger build, but somehow he still moved exactly the same. Confident, relaxed, like the whole world belonged to him. For a second I wondered if I was imagining things. Then he looked up. Our eyes met across the street. He froze. I froze. Neither of us moved. Then, his face broke into the exact same grin I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. Clark? Hearing my name in his voice after almost 9 years hit me harder than I expected. Dallas? He laughed. No way. Before I even realized what I was doing, I'd already crossed the street. The hug happened naturally. Neither of us planned it. 1 second we were awkwardly standing there. The next his arms were around me, pulling me into one of those rough, familiar hugs that instantly erased nearly a decade. Man, he laughed, stepping back. Look at you. I was about to say the same thing. You got taller. I definitely didn't. No? No. He looked me up and down dramatically. Then maybe I shrunk. I laughed. Some things really never changed. What are you doing here? I asked. My parents moved back. For good? He nodded. Dad retired. Mom missed this place. I looked toward the house. It feels weird seeing someone living there again. Yeah. He glanced around the neighborhood. It honestly feels like I never left. We spent the next 20 minutes standing beside his truck catching up. He'd worked construction for years before starting his own renovation business. I'd moved to the city after college. He'd had 2 serious relationships. I'd had none worth mentioning. You still drawing all the time? He asked. Graphic design now. Knew you'd make something out of it. And you? He smiled proudly. I finally work for myself. Seriously? Took forever, but yeah. I'm happy for you. His smile softened. Means a lot coming from you. For just a second, neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward, just quiet, comfortable, like we'd somehow skipped the missing years. His mom stepped outside carrying another box. Dallas! Coming, He looked back at me. You busy tonight? I don't think so. He rubbed the back of his neck. I figured maybe we could grab burgers at Pete's. I couldn't help smiling. The same place we practically lived every Friday? Exactly. I'd like that. His grin somehow got even bigger. 7? I'll be there. As I walked back toward my parents' house, Mom was already standing on the porch watching. She folded her arms. Don't start. You smiled. I smiled. You never smile like that. I literally just smiled. She gave me a knowing look. Dallas is back, isn't he? How did you know? She laughed. Because I've known you your whole life. I shook my head. You two were inseparable. We were kids. Mm-hmm. Mom, I'm just saying. She opened the front door. Some friendships don't stay in the past. I rolled my eyes. But later that evening, standing outside Pete's diner, watching Dallas wave at me from our old booth by the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that coming home was about to change my life in ways I never could have expected. Walking into Pete's diner felt like stepping into a memory. The little bell above the door still rang too loudly. The booths still had faded red seats with tiny cracks in the leather, and the smell of burgers and fresh fries hit me the second I stepped inside. Dallas was already there. He'd claimed our old booth by the window. Of course he had. You were always early, I said as I slid into the seat across from him. He smirked. And you were always 5 minutes late. I wanted to keep you humble. That's your excuse? It's the truth. He laughed, and for the first time that day I realized how much I'd missed hearing it. Some laughs you forget. His wasn't one of them. A waitress wandered over with 2 menus before stopping. Dallas? He looked up. Kelly? She laughed. Oh my God, you're actually back. You still work here? Somebody has to keep this place running. She glanced between us. And Clark too? Apparently we're having a reunion. She grinned knowingly. I'll give you boys a minute. The second she walked away, Dallas shook his head. Nothing changes here. Nope. I kind of love that. So do I. For a while we just talked, not about anything dramatic, just life. He told me about working construction in Denver, about saving every extra paycheck until he could finally start his own remodeling company. It was terrifying, he admitted. I bet. There were weeks I honestly thought I'd fail. But you didn't. No, he smiled. I got lucky. I don't think that's luck. What is it then? You worked for it. He looked at me for a second before quietly saying, You always believed in me. The comment caught me off guard. I remember, he continued, back in high school when everyone kept saying I'd never leave town. You proved them wrong. You were the only one who acted like it was obvious. I shrugged. You've always been stubborn, he laughed. That's probably true. Eventually, he leaned back. Tell me why you really came home. I hesitated. My job. That bad? I was working 12-hour days. Ouch. I stopped sleeping properly. Dallas frowned. I figured if I didn't leave for a while, you'd burn out, pretty much. He nodded slowly. I know that feeling. You do? My business got so busy last year I forgot how to live. What changed? He looked out the window. I realized making money didn't matter if I hated every day. I smiled. Sounds familiar. Our burgers arrived before either of us said anything else. For several minutes we just ate. Comfortable silence. Exactly like old times. You still steal fries? Dallas suddenly asked. What? You always stole mine. I absolutely did not. He raised one eyebrow. Without saying a word, he pushed his plate slightly closer. Go ahead. I rolled my eyes dramatically. I'm not 12 anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm serious. 3 seconds later, I reached over and stole one. Dallas burst out laughing. I knew it. Shut up. You literally proved my point. They looked better than mine. They're identical. I disagree. He shook his head. Some things really don't change. After dinner, we decided to walk around town. The summer air had cooled enough to make it comfortable. Streetlights flickered on one by one as we wandered past old storefronts. You remember this place? Dallas asked, pointing toward the tiny park. The swing set? Yeah. You pushed me off it. I absolutely did not. You absolutely did. I saved you. You convinced me to jump. I believed in you. I broke my wrist. Minor detail. I couldn't stop laughing. You've gotten worse. I've gotten funnier. That's debatable. He bumped my shoulder lightly. The touch lasted maybe half a second, but I noticed it. We reached the old baseball field where we'd spent countless afternoons as kids. The bleachers looked smaller now. Everything did. Dallas climbed onto the bottom row and sat down. I joined him. For a while, we watched teenagers finishing a pickup game. You ever think about how weird growing up is? He asked quietly. Every day. I always thought we'd still feel like kids. I don't. Me neither. The silence returned. This one felt different. Heavier somehow. I missed you. The words came so quietly I almost thought I'd imagined them. I looked over. Dallas was staring at the field, not at me. I missed you too, I admitted. He nodded once. I should have called more. So should I. I kept thinking too much time had passed. Same. Funny, isn't it? What is? 9 years disappear the second we start talking. I couldn't argue with that. Because he was right, it felt effortless, like we'd never stop being friends. As we walked back toward our trucks, Dallas suddenly spoke again. My parents are having a barbecue tomorrow. Oh? They invited half the neighborhood. Sounds about right. He scratched the back of his neck. You should come. I don't want to intrude. You wouldn't. You sure? He looked me directly in the eyes. Clark. Yeah? I want you there. There was something about the way he said it. Simple. Honest. Enough to make my chest tighten. I'll come. His smile returned immediately. Good. We reached my truck. Neither of us moved to leave. I had fun tonight, I said. Me too. We should do it again. Definitely. Another pause. Then Dallas surprised me. Instead of offering a handshake or another quick hug, he stepped forward and pulled me into another embrace, longer this time. Warmer. It still felt completely friendly, completely normal. But as I stood there with my arms around the boy who used to be my entire world, I couldn't ignore one unsettling realization. I'd only been home for 4 days, and somehow Dallas already felt like the best part of coming back. I wasn't nervous about the barbecue. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It was just a neighborhood cookout. I'd known most of these people since I was a kid. There was no reason for my stomach to tighten every time I thought about seeing Dallas again. Still, I changed shirts 3 times before leaving. Mom noticed immediately. You know, she said with an amused smile, you've never cared this much about what you wear to a barbecue. I'm just wearing a clean shirt. Mm-hmm. Mom. She laughed and waved me toward the door. Go have fun. The Miller's backyard looked exactly the way I remembered it. Music drifted from a speaker on the deck while kids chased each other through the grass. Neighbors stood around talking with paper plates in their hands, and someone was already arguing over whether the burgers were done. Dallas spotted me before I even reached the gate. There he is. He walked over carrying 2 bottles of soda. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind. I said I'd come. Yeah, but you're usually fashionably late. I was exactly on time. Barely. He handed me one of the drinks. Come on. He spent the next 20 minutes introducing me to people I'd either forgotten or hadn't seen in years. Some recognized me instantly. Others needed a reminder. The conversations all sounded the same. Clark? Wow, you've grown. When did you get back? Still drawing? Your mother says you work on computers now. Dallas stayed beside me through all of it, somehow making everything easier. At one point, his father walked over holding a plate piled embarrassingly high with food. Clark! Mr. Miller. He pulled me into a quick hug. Still calling me Mister? Old habits? He smiled. It's good seeing you again. You too. He looked between Dallas and me. You boys disappear for 9 years and then act like nothing happened. Dallas laughed. Pretty much. His father shook his head. I always figured you'd find your way back to each other eventually. The comment lingered with me longer than I expected. Later that afternoon, Dallas nudged my shoulder. Come on. Where? I want to show you something. We slipped away from the noise, walking through the side gate and into the woods behind the neighborhood. The trail was instantly familiar. No way, I laughed. You remember? Of course I remember. It was the path we'd explored almost every weekend growing up. Back then it had felt enormous. Now it seemed surprisingly small. You know, Dallas said, stepping over a fallen log, I don't think I've been back here since before we moved. I haven't either. Birds chirped somewhere overhead while leaves rustled in the warm breeze. Neither of us rushed. Eventually, the trees opened into a small clearing. In the center stood an old treehouse, or what was left of it. I stared. I can't believe it's still here. Barely. The wood had faded gray with age. One side leaned noticeably, and half the railing had fallen away. Dallas smiled. We spent an entire summer building this. Your dad did most of the work. Technicality. You handed him nails. I supervised. I laughed. You were bossy even then. I preferred the word leadership. We climbed the short ladder carefully. The treehouse creaked but held. Inside, dust covered everything. Someone had carved initials into one of the walls years ago. D plus C. I ran my fingers lightly over them. I forgot about this. I didn't. You remembered? Dallas nodded. I thought about this place a lot after we moved. I looked at him. Really? He leaned against the wall. When you're 17 and suddenly lose your best friend? He stopped himself. I guess you remember stuff. His words settled between us. I was angry for a while, I admitted. At me. At everyone. He nodded slowly. I was too. My parents kept saying we'd make new friends. So did mine. But it wasn't the same. No. Silence filled the little treehouse, comfortable, honest. I almost came back once, Dallas said quietly. When? My sophomore year of college. I frowned. You did? I drove halfway here. What? I got scared. Scared of what? He laughed softly without humor. I figured you'd moved on. I hadn't. I know that now. I stared at him. You really drove halfway across the country? He nodded. I turned around after 6 hours. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You idiot. I know. You could have just called. I should have. You absolutely should have. He smiled sheepishly. I wasn't very smart at 20. Were you expecting me to hate you? Maybe. I could never hate you. The words escaped before I had time to think. Dallas looked at me. Really looked at me. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. The air suddenly felt different. Heavier. Then a loud crack echoed beneath us. Dallas looked down. I think the floor just complained. I laughed. Probably a good sign we should leave. Agreed. We climbed down carefully. The moment our feet touched the ground, Dallas grinned. Race you. Before I could answer, he took off running. Oh, come on! I chased him through the trees, both of us laughing like we were 15 again. By the time I caught him near the edge of the woods, we were both completely out of breath. He bent over, laughing. You've gotten slower. I've gotten older. Excuses? I shoved his shoulder. He stumbled dramatically. Oh, violence now? You started it. He reached out instinctively to steady himself. His hand landed around my wrist. Neither of us moved. The laughter faded. We were suddenly standing much closer than either of us had realized. His grip wasn't tight, just enough to keep his balance. Our eyes met. The world around us seemed strangely quiet. For one impossible moment, it felt like neither of us wanted to step back. Then voices drifted toward us from the backyard. Dallas cleared his throat and let go. We should probably head back. Yeah. As we walked side by side toward the barbecue, neither of us mentioned what had just happened, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because for the first time since Dallas had come home, something between us no longer felt exactly like friendship. And judging by the thoughtful look on his face, I wasn't the only one who had noticed. I kept replaying that moment in the woods. Not because anything had happened. Nothing had. Dallas had caught himself from falling, grabbed my wrist, and we stood there for a few seconds, looking at each other before someone called our names. That was it. Completely harmless. So why couldn't I stop thinking about it? The answer annoyed me because I already knew it. I'd had a crush on Dallas when we were teenagers, not a dramatic, movie-worthy crush, just the quiet kind that sits in the background until the person disappears from your life. I'd buried those feelings years ago, or at least I thought I had. Apparently, seeing him again had dug them back up. 3 days passed. Dallas and I somehow ended up spending most of them together. One morning, we helped my dad repair part of the backyard fence. The next afternoon, we drove out to the lake we'd practically lived at every summer growing up. Nothing about it felt forced. If one of us texted the other, "Busy?" the answer was almost always, "Not anymore." Mom eventually noticed. "So," she said while drying dishes one evening. I sighed. "Here we go. You've spent more time with Dallas this week than anyone else. He's my best friend. He certainly was. He still is." She smiled softly. "I'm glad." There was no teasing in her voice this time, just genuine happiness. "You looked lonely before you came home." I didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong. Friday evening, Dallas picked me up just before sunset. "You trust me?" he asked. "Should I?" "Probably." "That's not reassuring," he laughed. "Come on." "Where are we going?" "You'll see." 20 minutes later, we turned onto a dirt road leading toward the hills outside town. Recognition hit almost immediately. "No way." He grinned. "You remembered. The overlook. The It sat above the valley where the whole town stretched beneath us. Growing up, we'd ridden our bikes there almost every weekend. Now his truck rolled to a stop beside the old wooden fence overlooking miles of trees and rooftops. The view was even better than I remembered. "I haven't been here in years," I admitted. "Neither have I." Dallas climbed into the truck bed. I followed. We sat with our legs hanging over the edge while the sun slowly sank toward the horizon. "This place always made problems feel smaller," he said quietly. "It still does." For a while, we just watched the sky change colors. Orange, pink, deep purple. Eventually, Dallas spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Were you happy?" The question surprised me. "In the city?" He nodded. I thought about it. "I like my job." "That's not what I asked." I looked down at my hands. "I know." He stayed quiet. "I kept thinking happiness would happen after the next promotion." "And?" "It never did." Dallas nodded like he'd expected that answer. "I spent years doing the same thing." "What changed?" He smiled faintly. "I realized success isn't worth much if you have nobody to celebrate it with." His words lingered. "You?" he asked. "What? You seeing anyone?" I laughed awkwardly. "No." "Really? Really? What happened?" "I don't know. You've always been a good guy. I guess I was waiting for the right person." He looked out over the valley. "I know that feeling." Something about the way he said it made me curious. "What about you?" He shrugged. "I dated. I remember you mentioning that. Twice seriously. What ended them?" He was quiet long enough that I wondered if he wouldn't answer. Finally, "They wanted futures I couldn't picture." "What kind of futures?" I don't know. He rubbed his hands together. It always felt like something was missing. I looked over. What was missing? He smiled sadly. I wish I knew. The wind picked up around us. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then Dallas reached into a small cooler behind him. I almost forgot. He handed me a bottle. My favorite root beer. You remembered? You drank these every time we came up here. I laughed. I haven't had one in years. I know. You know? I saw one at the gas station. And thought of me? He looked almost embarrassed. Yeah. I couldn't help smiling. Thanks. Darkness settled slowly across the valley. Stars began appearing one by one. You know something funny? Dallas asked. What? I was terrified before I saw you again. You were? I figured we'd have nothing to talk about. I laughed. I was worried you'd forgotten me. He looked genuinely shocked. Clark. What? I could never forget you. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. I mean it. I know. No. He turned toward me. You don't. His expression had changed, more serious than I'd ever seen it. When we moved, he stopped. I lost more than my hometown. I swallowed. You were my family. The words landed with surprising weight. Dallas, I spent years comparing every friend I made to you. I stared at him. That's probably unfair to them. A little. But none of them ever felt like... He searched for the right word. Home. Neither of us moved. The only sounds were the wind and distant crickets. I wanted to say something. Anything. Instead, I quietly admitted, I felt the same. His eyes met mine. For a moment, the entire world seemed to disappear. Just him. Just me. Just years of things we'd never said. Then his phone buzzed. The spell broke instantly. He looked at the screen and groaned. My mom. You should answer. If I don't, she'll send a search party. I laughed. Go ahead. As he stepped away to take the call, I leaned back against the truck cab and looked up at the stars. I had come home to recover from burnout. Instead, I was slowly falling for the same boy I'd never completely gotten over. The terrifying part wasn't my feelings. It was beginning to wonder whether Dallas might be feeling exactly the same way. After that night at the overlook, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone else would have noticed, but between Dallas and me. There was a new awareness. We still joked, still laughed, still acted like we'd always acted. Yet every now and then, I catch him looking at me just a little longer than before. And when our eyes met, neither of us looked away quite as quickly. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. Dallas. Busy? I smiled before I even realized it. Me. Depends. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Dallas. Help me paint my parents' porch? Me. That's your idea of fun? Dallas. No. A second message followed. But spending the day with you is... I stared at the screen. My heart reacted before my brain had time to. Then I typed the only reply I trusted myself to send. I'll be there in 20. Painting turned out to be mostly an excuse. We spent maybe an hour actually working. The rest of the afternoon disappeared into conversations. Dallas balanced on the porch railing while I rolled fresh paint onto the floorboards. You missed a spot. I absolutely didn't. You definitely did. He pointed dramatically. I leaned closer. There? A little left. I moved the roller. More. Dallas? What? You're making this up. His grin answered the question. I flicked the paintbrush toward him. A tiny drop landed on his forearm. He froze. You didn't. I absolutely did. He looked down at the white paint, then back at me. Oh. He reached for his own brush. No. Oh, yes. Dallas. He stepped closer. I'm warning you. You started this. Before I could escape, he lightly tapped the end of the brush against my t-shirt. A tiny streak of white appeared across my chest. I looked down. then back up. You regret that? Not even a little. The paint fight lasted less than a minute. By the end, both of us had streaks across our shirts, arms, and faces. His mother stepped outside carrying lemonade. She stopped, looked at both of us, then sighed dramatically. You two are 26? Dallas shrugged. Technically, she laughed despite herself. You've been together 1 week, and you're already acting like you're 12 again. Neither of us corrected her choice of words. Later that afternoon, we sat on the porch steps drinking lemonade while waiting for the paint to dry. Dallas leaned back on his elbows. I forgot what this felt like. What? Being around someone where I don't have to pretend. I looked over. You pretend? A lot. Why? He shrugged. Business. Clients? People expect confidence. You're confident. Sometimes. His smile faded. Not always. I wasn't used to seeing him vulnerable. Growing up, Dallas had always been fearless, or at least he'd acted that way. I always thought you had everything figured out. He laughed quietly. I was hoping everyone believed that. That evening, after we'd cleaned up, we drove into town for ice cream. The little shop looked exactly as it had when we were kids. The teenage employee glanced at us. 1 scoop or two? Dallas answered first. 2. You still order the same thing? I asked. He looked offended. Chocolate and peanut butter is timeless, I laughed. And yours? The girl asked me. Mint chocolate chip. Dallas smiled. I knew it. You remembered that too? I remember a lot about you. Again, that strange warmth spread through my chest. Instead of driving home, we wandered through downtown with our ice cream. The sidewalks were nearly empty. Store owners were locking up for the night. Everything felt peaceful. You know, Dallas said between bites. What? I almost texted you 100 times over the years. What stopped you? I'd write something. And? Delete it. Why? He looked embarrassed. I kept thinking you'd probably moved on. I smiled sadly. I thought exactly the same thing. So we're both idiots. Looks that way. He laughed. I can live with that. As we reached the town square, music drifted through the air. Someone had set up a small stage for the weekly summer concert. Families sat on folding chairs while couples danced on the grass. Dallas stopped walking. You remember? I looked toward the stage. We used to make fun of these concerts. We did. We said we'd never dance. He looked at me with a playful smile. We were pretty confident for 2 teenagers. I still don't dance. Liar. I'm serious. You danced at my cousin's wedding. I was forced. You were terrible. I know. He stepped backward toward the grass. Come on. No. Clark. Absolutely not. It'll be funny. No. He held out his hand. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. People danced all around us. Nobody paid us any attention. Dallas's smile softened. Trust me. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I'd trusted him my whole life. Maybe because saying no suddenly seemed impossible. I took his hand. He gently pulled me toward the edge of the crowd. I'm warning you, I muttered. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I. The music was slow, simple. We weren't really dancing, just swaying awkwardly while trying not to laugh. This is ridiculous, I whispered. It absolutely is. A minute later, we were both laughing anyway. Dallas shook his head. You know? What? This might actually be my favorite day since I came home. I smiled. Mine too. His hand remained in mine. Neither of us seemed eager to let go. The song ended. Applause filled the square. Still, we stood there for another few seconds. Finally, Dallas looked at me. His smile had disappeared. Not because he was unhappy, because he looked like he was thinking about something. Something important. Clark? Yeah? I need to tell you something. Before he could continue. Dallas. We both turned. An older man waved from across the square. Dallas sighed under his breath. My uncle. He let go of my hand reluctantly. I'll be right back. I watched him walk away. For the first time since he'd returned, I found myself hoping, not wondering, not imagining, hoping, because whatever Dallas had almost said, I had a feeling it was about to change everything. Dallas came back about 10 minutes later carrying 2 bottles of water. I'm sorry, he said, handing me one. Family? He sighed. My uncle can turn a 5-minute conversation into 30. I remember. He smiled. Yeah, you probably do. We started walking again, this time without any real destination. The streets were quieter now, and most of the stores had already turned their lights off. After a minute, I finally asked, You were going to tell me something? Dallas glanced ahead. I was. You don't have to if you change your mind. No. He shook his head. I just need to figure out how to say it. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, he stopped walking altogether. Can I ask you something first? Of course. When I moved away, he looked directly at me. Did you ever feel like we left things unfinished? The question caught me completely off guard. I've thought about that a lot. So have I. I took a slow breath. I think we were too young to understand what we were losing. Dallas nodded. I kept thinking I'd get another chance. At what? To tell you how important you were to me. I felt my heartbeat quicken. You were my best friend. You were more than that. The words hung between us. Dallas looked down at the sidewalk before speaking again. I didn't understand it back then. I stayed completely still. I just knew nobody else made me feel the way you did. The night suddenly felt impossibly quiet. When I started dating in college, he continued softly, I kept waiting to feel what I felt whenever I was around you. My chest tightened. It never happened. He laughed once, almost nervously. I kept telling myself I was just comparing everyone to my childhood best friend. I couldn't look away from him. But the older I got, he swallowed. The less that explanation made sense. His eyes finally met mine again. Clark. Yeah? I think I came back home hoping I'd get to find out if I was imagining all of this. I barely managed to speak. Imagining what? His voice dropped almost to a whisper. Us. For several seconds, I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I'd imagined hearing those words so many times over the years that I wasn't sure they were real. Dallas looked away. I shouldn't have said anything. No. You don't have to respond. Dallas. He stopped. I wasn't imagining it either. He slowly looked back at me. When you left, I laughed softly. I cried for weeks. I cried for... His expression softened immediately. I never told anyone why. I thought something was wrong with me. So did I. I tried dating. So did I. But every time, I smiled sadly. I compared them to you. Dallas let out a slow breath. I was hoping you'd say that. I've wanted to tell you since we were 17. His eyes widened. 17? I nodded. I was completely in love with you. For a second, he simply stared at me. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny, because he sounded relieved. Clark. What? I wasted 9 years. We both did. He stepped closer. What happens now? I smiled. I honestly have no idea. He laughed again. I was hoping you had a plan. I usually do. And? My brain stopped working about 5 minutes ago. Mine too. We both stood there smiling like idiots. Finally, Dallas spoke. Can I do something? You can ask. I'd rather show you. He took one slow step forward, close enough that only a few inches separated us. His eyes searched mine carefully, giving me every chance to move away. I didn't. His hand slowly found mine, our fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd always belonged there. I've wanted to hold your hand since high school, he admitted quietly. I smiled. I've imagined this more times than I'd ever admit. He laughed. I think we were both disasters. Definitely. Neither of us rushed anything, neither of us needed to. Simply standing there felt like something we'd been waiting almost a decade to do. Eventually, Dallas leaned his forehead gently against mine. Thank you. For what? For still being here. I closed my eyes for a moment. I think we were always going to find each other again. He smiled. I'd like to believe that. His phone buzzed again. He groaned dramatically. My mother. I laughed. You should answer. She already thinks I disappeared. He looked at the screen, then back at me. Dinner tomorrow? I smiled. Only if it's a date. Only if it's. His grin became impossibly wide. So, this is a date? I think it is. I've waited 9 years to hear that. So have I. As we finally walked back toward our trucks, our hands brushed together again. This time, neither of us pretended it was an accident. I smiled the entire drive home. Not because anything unbelievable had happened. Nothing dramatic. No fireworks. No grand confession in the pouring rain. Just two people who'd finally stopped pretending. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. Mom was sitting on the front porch when I pulled into the driveway. She looked up from her book. You're late. I know. Good evening. I tried to hide my smile. It was nice. She raised one eyebrow. Nice doesn't usually make someone grin like that. I'm smiling? You have been since you got out of the truck. I rubbed the back of my neck. Is it that obvious? To your mother? She laughed softly. Always. I sat beside her on the porch swing. She didn't ask any questions right away. She never had to. Eventually, she looked over. You and Dallas finally talked? I blinked. How did you... Clark? She smiled knowingly. You've looked at that boy the same way since you were 16. I stared at her. You... knew? I suspected. And you never said anything? It wasn't my story to tell. I looked down at my hands. He feels the same. I figured he might. I laughed. Everyone knew except us? Oh, sweetheart. She patted my shoulder. Sometimes the people inside the story are the last ones to understand it. The next evening, I spent nearly 20 minutes deciding what to wear. Again. I caught my reflection in the mirror and laughed at myself. This is ridiculous. My phone buzzed. You ready? I replied. Almost. A few seconds later, another message appeared. Take your time. I've already changed shirts twice. I laughed out loud. Only twice? His reply came immediately. Fine, 3 times. Somehow that made me even more excited. Dallas had chosen a small Italian restaurant about 30 minutes outside town. Nothing fancy, just quiet. When I climbed into his truck, he looked at me for a second before smiling. You look nice. So do you. I almost wore a different shirt. I know, he laughed. I can't believe you guessed. I didn't. I held up my phone. You literally texted me. Oh. He shook his head. Right. We both laughed. The nervousness disappeared almost instantly. Dinner felt surprisingly easy. No awkwardness. No wondering what we were supposed to be now. We were still us. Just different. Better. Halfway through dinner, Dallas reached across the table. Not dramatically. Not to make a point. He simply rested his hand beside mine. I turned mine over. Our fingers found each other naturally. Neither of us said anything. The quiet felt enough. After dinner, we drove back toward town with the windows down. Warm summer air filled the truck. You know, Dallas said, I almost canceled tonight. I looked over. You did? I was nervous. You? I've remodeled houses worth $500,000. And? Asking my best friend on our first real date? He laughed. That terrified me. I was nervous too. Really? I spent 20 minutes convincing myself not to overthink everything. He smiled. How'd that work out? It didn't. We both laughed again. Instead of taking me home, Dallas turned onto the road leading to the lake. The moon reflected across the water. The dock was empty. We walked to the end without saying much. Finally, Dallas leaned against the railing. I've been thinking. Dangerous. I know. He nudged my shoulder. I mean it. What about? If we're doing this, he smiled. Us. I'd like to do it right. What does that mean? It means he looked at the water. I don't want to rush because we missed 9 years. I nodded slowly. I don't either. I want to get to know you again. You already know me. I know 17-year-old Clark. He smiled. I want to know 26-year-old Clark. Something about those words hit me deeply. I want that too. He reached for my hand again. Would you officially be my boyfriend? I laughed. You really asked that like we're still teenagers. I panicked. It was adorable. It was? Very. I stepped a little closer. My answer is yes. His smile spread slowly across his face. You have no idea how happy that makes me. I think I do. For a moment, we simply stood there. The lake was perfectly still. The whole world seemed to slow down. Dallas looked at me with the same careful expression he'd had the night before. I'm gonna kiss you. It wasn't really a question. I smiled. I know. He gave me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I closed the small distance between us. The kiss was gentle, unhurried, more relief than urgency. Years of wondering gave way to quiet certainty. When we finally pulled back, we were both smiling. Hi, Dallas whispered. I laughed. Hi. I've wanted to do that for a very long time. So have I. He rested his forehead lightly against mine. I guess we're finally caught up. Not quite. No. We still owe each other 9 years. Dallas smiled. Then we'd better get started. As we walked back toward the truck hand in hand, I realized something. Coming home wasn't just about escaping the life I'd burned out from. It was about finding the person who had always made this place feel like home. And somehow, after all those years apart, we'd found our way back exactly when we needed each other most.